have probably said the word tariff more in the last 30 days than I have ever said in my lifetime. Now, if you're unsure why, I'm a financial advisor. My name's Lisa, if you're new here, and I have been doing this for 14 years, and we have not had to discuss tariffs that much, but with everything that's going on, tariffs is at the forefront of everybody's mind. It is all people want to talk about when it comes to their financial planning, and there's a lot of misconceptions of what tariffs are, how they work, how they actually are going to impact you, and what you can control and what you can't control, and focusing on what you can control. And because of this constant talk about tariffs, it is April 3rd, 2025 when I'm recording this, all the announcements came out yesterday after market close. And we are seeing some pullback a little bit in the markets right now. I don't know how the day is going to end. Could go rising up. I have no idea. But I just thought it would be good to go through the basics of how tariffs work, how it's going to affect you and your planning, and 3 things that you can focus on during times like this to stay on track for your planning. So if that sounds good to you, you don't have an econ major, but you want to understand more, I don't have an econ major either, then stick around because that's what we're going to talk about. Now, before I jump in, I'm going to do 3 little housekeeping things. One is that I'm obviously on, if you've never been here before, you don't know this. I'm on the road, right? This is not my typical place that I film, hence the, air conditioning unit behind me. So that's going to go on in the middle of this. Hopefully you can still hear me. I apologize if it's annoying in the background, but I believe you'll still be able to hear me. 2 is I've got a very rickety table that I'm doing this off of, so I will probably hit the table like right there, and the camera will shake a bit. I apologize again about that. Unfortunately, there's not much I can do about that because this is all I have in this hotel room. 3rd is that I'm going to be looking at my notes because I have done this video a couple times. My voice is getting a little sketchy or scratchy if you haven't noticed, but I need my notes to make sure I'm staying on track so that this is not like an hour-long video, because nobody, as much fun as we're going to have talking about tariffs right now, nobody wants to hear about it for an hour. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think they are. Okay, so let's go through how tariffs actually work, because I feel like from my conversations that I've been having with people don't actually understand how tariffs work, and they're a little ashamed that they don't understand them because we're supposed to know what tariffs are. There's no supposed to anything. Nobody's getting education anymore about how these basic things work, and so do not be ashamed if you don't understand tariffs, because we're going to go through it now. As I said, you don't have to be an econ major to understand this, because I am not going to use any kind of financial language you don't understand. So I'm going to use an example. I'm going to use the auto industry as an example. And I'm going to use 2 countries. I'm going to use the United States and Japan. And we're going to talk about auto mainly because people know Japan auto companies and United States auto companies. And also I have experience. I lived a year in Japan, and so I have some personal understanding of how it actually has affected things. So we've got company A, that's going to be a U.S. company that wants to bring their cars over to Japan. And then we've got company B, which is a Japanese company that is going to be importing or exporting cars from Japan, importing to the United States. Okay, so, and we're going to use Japan as the government that we're going to be talking about just for right now. Okay, so with that set up, let's go. So what is a tariff? A tariff is a tax imposed on goods imported from another country. So basically, one big misconception is people think that it is governments paying each other. It's not. It's a company paying an outside government. So in this case, since company A, which is a United States company, wants to take their cars and sell them in Japan, import them into Japan, Japan as a government says, that's wonderful, but in order to do that, you've got to pay us a tariff. I'm making up a percentage. Let's say it's 25%. So company A has to pay a 25% tariff to Japan to sell cars there. Okay? Now, this is common practice everywhere. And we'll get into why does a government want to do this. So when company A does that, let's say these are all wonderful companies. We're not going to talk about profit margins. We're not going to talk about corruption. We're not going to talk about anything. All of this is, we're trying to stay very neutral on all this stuff, okay? This is a basic company that has a certain profit margin so that they can keep everybody employed. It's not overflated. It's not any of this stuff, right? It's perfect company when it comes financially. No corruption, nothing, okay? They are going to have to take that 25% that they paid in tariff and put it into the price of their car because they're perfect company. So they don't have a bunch of inflated profit margin. So they need to do that in order to keep their people working, to keep the company solvent, to all that stuff, okay? So now the US company in Japan is having a much higher price tag on their cars than the Japanese cars, than the companies that make their cars in Japan. They're Japanese companies. Those cars are much cheaper. And that affects the amount that they're going to sell those cars, right? Because what person's going to be walking around in Japan and going, this Japanese made car is X amount, but this other car is like so much more expensive. Is that worth it? For most people, it's not going to be worth it. And that is how tariffs work. It is a company paying a government money for the privilege of selling their goods there, and typically that tariff goes into the price of the good that's being sold to that foreign country, to those consumers over there. Okay, so with that on the line, people would say, well, why does the government want to do this? Why does President Trump want to do this? Well, here's some pros for this for the government. The government, A, brings an income from this. Company A is giving them money. Wonderful. They love that. And many Americans will say, well, maybe that can help offset the deficit that we have. That's another story. We'll get into that in a second, or we'll get into that in a different video. But that's one reason. It's income for them. Great. Another reason is that it really helps the Japanese companies look very good to the Japanese consumer, because we talked about the American company automaker has to have a much higher price on their cars. So Japanese people are going to tend to purchase Japanese cars, which is better for the Japanese economy, because then that company is going to grow bigger and they're going to make more money. And when they make more money, they have to, it means just more dollars that go to taxes to the government. And then they employ more people, and it just helps the economy in general. So countries like promoting their country's, companies. That makes sense. The other thing is it's a bargaining chip. So it is probably the biggest way that countries deal with each other, and they use it as bargaining chips a lot. A recent example is President Trump with Canada and Mexico saying we're going to raise tariffs unless you help us with the fentanyl crisis. Some people say that was a hoax. Again, not getting into that, but he used it as a bargaining chip. Okay? So there you go. So those are the reasons that a country would want to do that. Those are the reasons that President Trump is saying it is good for America to do that, because he's saying that our tariffs that we tariff imports coming in from other countries is very, very low comparatively, or non-existent in some cases. And then if we raise the tariff prices, then A, the American government gets more income. B, it's going to help U.S. Companies do better and look better and all that stuff. And C, it's a bargaining chip that we don't really have right now. Well, technically we do, because we could raise it, but it's part of the bargaining process. Okay, a lot of people don't like that and disagree with him on that, and that's fine, but that's what he's saying. So essentially, here's what could happen that could be bad about tariffs. and why people are saying this could very negatively affect you, and why the market's down a little bit and all this stuff. I think the market tends to be down when there's uncertainty out there. And I still think, even though the tariff prices have been, or percentages have been announced, I still think there's uncertainty, because now it's negotiation, and is he telling the truth, and all that stuff happens. So it's uncertainty a bit. But here's the downside for the consumer that people are making this argument. One is that your choices go down, right? So if you've got, I have an apple. You have 4 different apples out there, and I have no idea where apples come from. I do money, I don't do this stuff. But let's say you have a domestic, you have a California apple, you have a French apple, and you have a Japanese apple. I don't know if that's even realistic, but let's say you do. Now, because of tariffs on the French apple and the Japanese apple are up, I only have this one domestic apple that I can buy for a reasonable price. That brings my choices down. I don't like that as a consumer. Okay, that's one thing that can happen. 2 is that it could stunt our U.S. companies, because if Japan says, well, you're raising your tariffs, we're going to raise ours to 50%, now the U.S. automakers are going to have a really hard time selling their products over there. Really hard time. Although they might change their mind and not sell over there. The reason I kind of chose Japan, just by the way, is I spent a year in Japan. I don't think I saw one U.S. car over there. Not one. I saw some German cars, but not one U.S. car do I remember ever seeing. Which is strange to me, because we see so many different types of vehicles here. So it's working for Japan in some respects. The tariffs help, with the internal of the economy there. But anyhow, I digress. So that is one of the things that they're saying too, is it could hurt U.S. companies trying to export to other places. Okay, that's another thing. Another piece is they say, okay, great. You've got a U.S. company who's making the final product here in the United States, but they're bringing in pieces from other countries. So for their cars, let's say their plugs come from Japan. Well, now they're paying a tariff on that good coming in, and yes, it's American-made product, but it's got pieces coming from other countries, and so that price is still going to go up, because that is calculated in the cost of good when it comes to you. How much is it priced is based off of all these other things. And so they're saying that's part of the problem. Now, the Trump administration is saying, I don't think that's a problem, because here's 2 things that can happen. One is, let's start making it here. Let's find a company that makes it here instead of making it from Japan. The other thing they're saying is the demand is going to be so high for the U.S. goods that the company can actually negotiate with the Japanese manufacturer the base price to come down. And so that will even out basically the tariff price in there, because they're going to have so much demand that they can negotiate that and bring that down, the price of that piece coming in to finish the car. That true or not? I don't know. I mean, that's business, that's economics, but I don't know if that's going to work. So those are those 2. Those are kind of the things that are going up. And the biggest thing is, we have had to pay higher prices in general for the last, 4 years, 3-4 years, because of inflation and everything else. And people are like, well, what, you mean I have to pay more again? I don't want that. Which is kind of the emotional side of things, because we're kind of calling the cart before the horse idea. And so we'll just have to see how this all plays out when it comes to the pricing and how it works, and how the American companies can work around this. And I do have faith in the American companies. I think that they'll be able to make this work, just because I don't think they want, it's not good for business to keep raising your prices. So I think they'll figure out something, but it might not be, they might not like it, which I don't blame them. So anyway, I think it will work out in the long run. Do I think there's going to be some turmoil when it comes to the economy, the markets, all that stuff? In the meantime, yes, I do. And we're seeing it just today. So here's a couple things. So we've kind of talked about the big economic thing. Hopefully you didn't find that. I'm trying not to get into the politics of stuff of who's right and wrong. Just want you to understand it. And now for the last couple minutes, we're going to talk about, we've talked about the big economy thing. We've talked about the geopolitics of it. Let's talk about how it actually affects you, because I feel like that's the piece that's missing a lot. These big conglomerates are talking about, oh, the consumer, but it's not really about you. They're just talking about this big thing that it makes it very difficult to understand how it's going to affect you. So it's going to affect you in a couple different ways. Price of things could go up. Nobody likes that. Obviously, that affects your saving and your spending, and we'll get into that in a second. And the markets. The markets are going to be hard to deal with, because companies might struggle with supply and demand issues, which is going to struggle with their profits, which is how markets work, is you want companies to be profitable, and so it could hurt the stock market. And there's uncertainty, as I said, in the markets, so they're unsure of what's going on, and so that always kind of causes some issues. Okay, so you've got your investments and you've got your financial planning and your spending strategy. Those are the things that you need to focus on. This debate about tariffs and should they be on or it doesn't matter. And here's why it doesn't matter. You can't do anything about it. We vote. That's the only thing that you can't control it. You cannot control the percentages. You cannot control how this. So focus on what you can control is my point to you. Here's the 3 things you can control during times like this. You can control your saving and your spending. Now, people are going to say, well, if everything goes up in price, then I can't control. Everything isn't going to go up in price. There are going to be some things that will stay where they are or hopefully go down a bit. And it's being talked about that the Trump administration is saying they're going to work with U.S. companies to try to keep their prices down or even lower them more using this scenario. I don't know if that's possible or if that's true, but that's what they're saying. So let's take the benefit of the doubt and say that does happen. Not everything is going to go skyrocketing in price. It's just not. But you will have to make some concessions, because you're going to have to decide if keeping your saving strategy where it is or increasing it, whatever's working for your big financial strategy, how much you have to save has to be very important. And is that a non-negotiable? If you have to save $500 a month to be on track for your big piece, you might have to make some concessions on the spending piece, because if spending becomes more expensive, if what you're buying becomes more expensive, you might just have to buy less of it and not buy certain luxury items, and I don't mean that as but certain things that you don't need to hit your goal of saving. So you do have that ability to do that. Do you have to buy an apple? No, you don't have to buy an apple, right? You can buy, a cucumber that's cheaper, or what, I'm just saying that you have your choices. I think what you have to do in a time like this is, if you're building towards a plan and you have a good plan, you've got to make your saving a non-negotiable and make it work. Your budget work with what you can buy, okay? Now, for some people, I know that's going to be a lot more difficult than others. I get that in terms of economics and what you bring in and stuff. So that can sound kind of mean, but you do have the ability to set a goal and make that goal of savings a non-negotiable. And it can be a little flexible, but maybe your non-negotiable is, I am not saving less than $100 a month. That's okay. You can have a less and a high, high and a low, but just keep moving towards that. Don't lose your focus on your saving goal, because that is something you can control. Okay, number 2 that you can control is your strategy when it comes to your investments. Is this the perfect time to make changes to your investments? Typically, when the market's not doing fantastic, it's a harder time to make these changes, okay? I'll give you that. However, this is something that you can start to formulate and put together for when the markets start to recover, because I do think at some point they're going to. I don't think this is forever going to be a bad market scenario. I could be wrong, but I don't believe that. So when the markets recover, you have your strategy and you're ready to put it in place. Everybody, whether you're 30 years old or 70 years old, should have a strategy of short-term money, mid-term money, meaning 2 to 10 years out, and 10 years plus. Okay? You should have different investment strategies for that. Not everything should just be in one account having this like aggressive or moderate, or you want to have it work with the time period it's going to be used in. Okay? Because a 30-year-old, you might say everything should be so expensive because, or so expensive, so aggressive because they've got, 35 years till retirement at age 65. Yeah, but maybe they're trying to buy a house too. Okay? That's a short-term goal. So that money needs to be invested differently than their retirement accounts that they can't touch till 59 and a half because of that rule. So everybody really should have different buckets doing different strategies based off of the timeline that you're going to be using them. Okay? So that's the way you need to start thinking about your investment strategy differently than the traditional 60% stocks, 40% bonds because I'm 50 years old. No, you need to have different strategies for different time periods you're going to need that money in. And if you have questions on how to do that or want to figure out how that works for you personally, feel free to reach out to us. We do this with people all the time, but I would need to know your situation and what we're trying to do to personalize it for you. So feel free to take a look at our description, and our contact information's in there, and it's no obligation consultation on that, just so you can get some information. Okay, with that out of the way, your investment strategy should always be set up like this to get through times like this, because long-term strategy, it's going to go up and down and up and down, so the short-term results are not as important on that. But your midterm and your short term are going to be more impacted, and so should have a different investment strategy, if that makes sense. So putting something in place like that, or at least figuring that out during times like this, can help you get a sense of control, and you're ready to go and implement when it's the right time for you. All right, the third thing you can control is your emotions. I think this is the biggest thing, but I'm not going to take forever on this because I've talked about this before many, many times. The media, we see financial news and we think they're not the media. They are the media. They get paid the exact same way everybody else does, which is more eyeballs, more clicks, all that stuff gets them money. And that's how they stay in business, okay? So they use terminology to evoke emotion that is going to make you come back. They have learned that when the markets are not doing well, people tend to tune in more than when the markets are doing well. When the markets are doing well, people kind of tune out and just go do their thing. When the markets aren't doing well, they start playing into that. They use words like tumble, crash, these kind of like very volatile words to get you to feel emotion and keep going back. It's like emotional eating, right? It's your emotional reading, emotional education, right? And so you need to keep that in mind when you're reading things. I don't know how many people send me articles to read, to see what this person says, should we be following this, blah, blah, blah. A lot of the emotion is in the words that are being used to, I hate to say it, emotionally manipulate you into coming back. And you need to keep that under wraps, because you could be making huge mistakes in decision making based off of these emotions. And these guys don't care about that because they're business. They're not doing your personal management. They don't know you, right? I don't think that they're horrible people or anything, but they're there to create their business and keep it going for their people, right? So you've got to keep that in mind when you are watching this stuff, and make sure you are talking things through before you make emotional decisions that could really affect your planning negatively, in the long run. Those are your things that you can do today when it comes to addressing the tariff issues. I hope this helped. I hope that this gave you a little piece of understanding of how tariffs work, how it might affect you, and what you can do about it, because that's what we were trying to accomplish. Got this done pretty succinctly, I think, for having that much content. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. Stay strong during times like this, and we will see you on the next video. Bye-bye.